Okay, back for my next video. Those of you noticing my chat window, that is not a bug. The system I'm in does have 1,670 odd people currently in it, despite it being a weekday in the afternoon here in the United States, which means that the system usually has even more people than what you're seeing. And you may be saying, but doesn't Eve have over 5,000 systems? Well, I've got my calculator open here, and let's say that this was a normal system. 5,000 times 1682 is a large number. I was at 8.4 million, and clearly there are not 8.4 million people logged into Eve. When you log in, you can see there's generally between 25 and 40,000 people at a time. This is Jita, the largest trade hub in Eve Online. It is constantly crowded with people buying and selling stuff. Um, its market, initially Jita was simply had more stations and more mission agents than almost any other system, so it naturally attracted a lot of people. It was also a new player starting point, which further attracted people. Once it became a trade hub, traders started bringing lower volume items, so say advanced moon materials that get processed at player-owned structures, or morphite, which only gets mined out in 0-0, contracts for Tech 2 BPOs, things that were kind of hard to sell and where people didn't know where to go to look for these items. They came to Jita to do that buying and selling. And then once you have a bunch of industrialists, a bunch of mission runners, and a bunch of new players all in the same system, the cycle just sort of perpetuated itself, and Jita has grown larger and larger and larger, despite some players, mostly the Goons' efforts to stop that. There was recently a Burn Jita event where hundreds of players suicided themselves against the denizens of Jita, trying to cause havoc and maybe make the system less popular, but didn't work. It was perhaps a fun time for a lot of people, though. The reason I've come here is I've reached my what I think is going to be my last advanced militia agent mission, and they warn you to get ready for a fight. And I figured this is a good time to go ahead and put together the ship that I'm going to be moving over to an actual mission agent in. Um, I decided to use a Merlin, but I was operating under the assumption that it still had 4 high slots, 2 for turrets, 2 for missile launchers, and I was mistaken. My EFT did not reflect that change. Battle Clinic did not reflect that change, but that is apparently a change that happened somewhere, and I missed it. Eve is always changing as far as what ships can fit what and that sort of thing. So I was able to salvage my fitting, and you've got what you see before you. Instead of just buying the regular Tech 1 items, I have splurged and bought what are called named Tech 1 items. The difference can be lower fitting requirements so that they're using less power grid or less CPU. Perhaps they'll do more damage in the case of a weapon or boost more shield. In the case of some modules, both. They're just better in every way. Named modules are dropped by NPCs either in missions or from rats, which can then be sold in the market. They're not made by a player. There are Tech 1 items, the unnamed items like this one, the 1MN Afterburner, that was produced by a player similar to my early production mission. There's Tech 2 items, which are also produced by players, but a little more complex process. Instead of just minerals, there's a whole lot of other things involved. Frequently, normally you only also additionally need morphite and some additional skills to produce it, but getting your hands on a Tech 2 BPO and used to involve getting research points, and maybe a research agent would give you a BPO on a lottery. That was rare. They were worth billions. Now you can use invention to create BPCs that can do Tech 2 production, but that is a whole video for itself, I think. But a combination of Tech 1 items for ones that like the Afterburner, where there aren't really, we'll say, affordable alternatives to me. But for the most part, most of my items are now named, so I'm going to get a little more out of them. I'm doing 66 DPS. With my afterburner and overdrive injector and a nanofiber, I should be pretty quick and maneuverable. This is a magnetic field stabilizer, specifically a Gauss field balancer. It's a named magnetic field stabilizer. This will boost the damage of all of my hybrid weapons. So all 3 of my blasters are now doing more damage because of this low slot item. I did go with a capacitor battery what this does is it gives me a larger capacitor. It doesn't make it recharge any faster, it just means it'll drain. I have more of it before it'll drain, which seems to be more of what I need. I'm not really running into issue, just maybe at the very beginning when I'm taking a lot of DPS in a mission, I might need to run multiple cycles in a row of my shield, but after that it's not too big of a deal, so I don't want to sacrifice things like shield recharge rate like I would get if I had a cap power relay or certain other items that would also consume more
Skill
power
training
grid. So
completed.
long story short, I don't really know if it's the best fit. Like I said, I did have a different fit spec'd out in EFT, bought all my items, realized they had changed the Merlin, and sort of had to just make do. So this probably isn't the best fit in the world, but I think it's going to do the job. Only one power grid left, every slot used, so it's not too bad. It should be pretty fast and pretty maneuverable, which is nice. As far as getting to Jita, you may be wondering, like, how in the world amongst these 5,000 systems do I get from place to place? Well, you can click on People and Places up here, change your search type to Solar System, go ahead and type in Jita, hit search, um, and now you're going to get a results window. If I had perhaps had this set to all, there might be multiple things that would pop up as having Jita in them, but in this case there's only a solar system and there's only one. Now that I've found Jita in a menu like this, I can now right click on it and add waypoint, and it will now, all of the gates to get there will appear in the top left along with the highlighted gate in the overview for the next gate in each jump to show me the path, sort of provide me those breadcrumbs. You could use your map. We haven't really looked at the map. This is the solar system map, which actually we have looked at the solar system map when using our probes to find exploration sites. But there is a beautiful star map that can show you tons of statistics and other things. Right now it looks like I have how many ships were destroyed in the last, let me get one that's not covered. In the last 24 hours. So these areas of red are areas where a lot of ships are getting destroyed. But you can see the universe is vast. Um, Pretty much everything around the outside is 0, 0 space. The inside is all of the Empire space with Caldari space here, Galente here, Minmatar generally over here, and the Amar Empire down here. But yeah, there's a lot of useful things in these maps as far as finding faction warfare sites, identifying different routes to get to different places. There's lots of different labels and star highlight options. You could spend a lot of time looking through this. You can also unflatten the map and get a more 3D view of it, which is visually appealing, if maybe not the most useful thing in the world. But we'll go ahead and close that. So we now have a well-fitted ship that we can now use to go back to our home system. To get to Jita, that was actually something else I did want to go over. I have a shuttle here. I didn't want to fly one of the ships have actually been using to Jita, because then I would fit this new ship, and I'd have to leave my other ship here or sell it, which wouldn't be the end of the world. But instead I bought a shuttle. Shuttles are sold in every single NPC station. They cost 20,000 ish, and are very quick, maneuverable. They go into warp almost instantly. They warp at a decent speed. But that's all they can do. They can't fit. They're like a pod essentially, in that they cannot fit any modules. They cannot be upgraded. They can carry almost nothing. But they're good for just hopping system to system. And now I can just leave the shuttle in Jita, and I really don't care about it. I could reprocess it down to tritanium and sell the tritanium for probably pretty close to the 20,000 ISK that it cost. You know what? I'm actually curious about that. Tritanium prices have gotten very high. One of the things that does limit the price of tritanium is shuttles. That people, if the tritanium in them was ever worth a lot, they could just buy huge amounts of shuttles directly from the NPCs. Oh yeah, my clever name. I wanted to make sure to distract people, and confuse them. So I named it Not a Shuttle. So we can just reprocess our shuttle. We're gonna get 2,000 tritanium from it. We can then go into our inventory. Sell it. Okay, and we see that at the current price of titanium, I'm going to get 13,356. Of course, my reprocessing skills aren't very good, and there was also taxes taken. So somebody with more skills probably could have gotten 15, 16,000 ISK for the titanium. So we see, even though I think they used to sell shuttles even cheaper, they raised the ceiling for titanium by raising the shuttle prices. We see it's already actually approaching that ceiling again. But we'll go ahead and undock in our new ship. And I did do a little bit of research. I guess I'm a little embarrassed about that one. Point 0.9 and 1.0 systems do not feature any rats. So that's why I have had no success in my last ratting endeavor. The missions I've been running in the meantime to get up to this last combat mission have been pretty good. They've each focused on teaching one thing. The one that kind of surprised me, that is an interesting thing to talk about, is fleet commanders. If you do join a player corp, and I highly recommend you do that at some point, and my ship is warping sideways. If you do join a player corp at some point and you're doing PvP, there's always going to be one person calling the shots. At least there should always be one person calling the shots. Who's your fleet commander? That's the person who's going to designate a primary target for everyone to focus their fire on. This always needs to be a very experienced player if you're going to have any sort of success. He's going to tell you when to warp, when to shoot, when not to shoot, and all you're doing really when you're PvPing in a group is taking direction from that fleet commander. And a good fleet commander can just make all the difference. If you want some really great examples, do a search on YouTube for Rooks and Kings. They have just the best videos of such organized gangs with some really good fleet commanders, so those can be a lot of fun to watch. The clarion calls and their battle reports are just some great examples of good fleet tactics. And they did that to a degree in the one tutorial just by having pop-up messages that were supposed to be coming from the Concord police telling you what to do and when to do it, just to get in that habit of following instruction. I thought that was a little bit unique. They had me warp scramble a ship at one point. You may have been asking yourself that when someone starts to shoot me, unless they pop me really, really quickly, why don't I just warp away? What's to stop me? Well, the first thing they're going to do is either use a warp scrambler or warp disruptor on you. Let's go ahead and pull one of those up in the market while I talk. What that does is it prevents you from warping. The only defense against a warp scrambler is, well, to simplify things, the main defense against it is a warp core stabilizer. It's a low slot item that can reduce the effectiveness of a warp scrambler and allow you to warp away even when you are being warp scrambled. Warp scramblers have a range of 7,500 meters, and you'll see this warp scramble strength of 2. The warp disruptors have a much larger optimal range. Pretty sure it's 20k, but they only do 1 point. So this 2 point would probably be enough to hold you down, even if you had a warp core stabilizer. You would need 2 warp core stabilizers. At that point, you've so gimped your ship, you really just shouldn't be flying it. So warp core stabilizers are really only going to be used when you have haulers or that type of thing, specifically going into very high-risk areas. But that's the main way that they're going to hold you. If you want more advanced reading as far as warp scrambling and tackling, there are ships called interdictors, there are heavy interdictor cruisers, there are warp disruption bubbles that are anchorable structures. So there's other different ways to hold people, but some of those can only be used in 0-0 space. So that's why you can't just warp away when somebody's coming to attack you. Anybody who's planning on attacking somebody else is going to have a warp scrambler fitted, and that's why they're going to very quickly want to get in that 7,500 meter range, which is why frigates can stay very important in battle. Smaller ships lock other ships quicker, and smaller ships take longer to get locked. So if you want to try to blow up some other player's frigate, you're going to need a frigate that can very quickly lock it, get within that 7,500 meters, and get that warp scramble on it because it's going to take longer if you have a battleship in your game for him to do the same thing. Now, your frigate might not last the entire battle. Um, it doesn't have to. It only has to last long enough for those bigger ships to
Warp drive
get their
active.
own points on the target. But that's why that initial tackle from that frigate can be very important. Generally, as long as somebody is tackling it as a frigate, they're also going to have the stasis web of fire. If you're slowing the person down and stopping them from warping away, it's going to be even easier for your battleships, battle cruisers, whatever you're with, to get in range and start putting their own points and DPS on target. In some case, you might remain the only tackle. The other guys might have long-range ships, and they're just not going to get close. So this is supposed to be the big final battle. Um, One of the things that they discussed is that picking your primary target is important. Um, Ooh, and I did change my default orbit distance earlier. I'm going to put that back down to 500. Um, I don't think that's going to be too important for the most part, especially with the short range of my weapons. It's the first person I can get in range of is going to be my primary target. This guy's burning in quick on me, which is pretty nice. Once he gets a little closer, we'll go ahead and stasis him. And we can see I've been stasis and warp scrambled. That could make my life a little bit tricky. And let's see how this cap holds out. The trick is going to be that if I'm being stasised, I need to be very close in for my blasters to be effective. So if I'm being stasised, it's going to be very hard for me to get in close. Luckily, my own stasis web of fire is going to make it hard for him to be moving away quicker than me, combined with my afterburner, my overdrive injector, my nanofibers. It looks like I have been able to get in range, and I'm taking him down pretty quickly. This terrorist leader, the trainees hopefully will not have their own stasis, and they appear not to. So they should be pretty easy to take down. And we'll give a couple more cycles on my shield booster. That was a fun first wave, although I'm thinking the next waves are probably going to be a little trickier. Once I get within range, I probably could get away with turning off my afterburner. My cap is holding very nicely, so I don't really feel a need to do that. I don't want to worry about cycling it on and off and then forgetting about it. Don't want to stay still. Even when there aren't any hostiles, you should at least orbit a can, just double click in a direction and move. You don't want to have some things appear right on top of you and you're not moving at all. No velocity is death for a frigate. And there is some loot in this guy. As long as he had some loot, I will check the others. And it actually looks like I completed the mission. There is no second wave. It was just the 3 ships, so I guess I didn't need to concern myself. We can see this is one of the first times I think I've had several of the exact same weapon mounted. I get the option to group all weapons. I can click that, and I now have all of my blasters on a single grouping. It means I can get them turned on quicker. Instead of having to hit 3 buttons on the keyboard or 3 buttons on the GUI, I can just hit the one, and it looks like the trainees don't have any loot. So we'll go ahead and dock. The downside is
Warp
all 3 of
drive
your weapons
active.
have to be turned on and off together, and they all have to be pointed at the same target. For the most part, that's usually not an issue. Even if you're in a fleet of several ships, all of the several ships are going to be shooting at the same target, so that's normally not going to cause you any problems. Um, but it is a useful feature to know about. Just click that little guy there to group and ungroup. My only other mission besides my combat mission is one of my final, I believe, business missions,
Docking
possibly industry.
permission
I forget which one of
requested.
those I completed. And that's just a production mission. I'm producing something that doesn't normally
Docking
exist in the
request
game and exists really only
accepted.
for this mission. And the production queue slots, the production queues were back all full again, so it was like a 3 hour wait before my production job will even start when I initially put it in. And that has 35 minutes left, so then I should be able to finish my missions with Coke Siri at that point. But let's go ahead and complete my combat mission, and that's it. Um, that was the last of my advanced military missions. I've got nothing else for them. I'm going to do my very last mission, I think last mission. Let's check the journal to verify that fact. 8 of 10, so I might have a couple more simple production missions that I'm going to knock out. And then at that point, I will have completed all of the missions for the professions, and I get some choices about what I want to try next. I am going to look into finding the Sisters of Eve storyline arc missions. I believe that they have a whole series of missions that you can run through. I might have to hunt down the starting system for that. And maybe that's what we'll be able to begin with next video, and I hope to see you then.